Sorry about the late minutes before I had to come in here. Hey, Miss Shirley. Hey, Nina. I hear music. I didn't know where I was hearing it from because I ain't turned music on yet. Alrighty, what are we gonna listen to tonight? This sounds like a Disney. Right. Okay. Hey, Pebbles. Hey, Nancy. Sorry I'm late, guys. My father-in-law called me about 5 minutes before I was coming here, and I finally, just a few minutes ago, handed the phone over to Mike and said, "Here, you talk to him." I can't. What a day. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started just because we're already getting started late. So let's see, where am I at? I kept my contacts out today, so. This is dedicated to the reformed bad boys and good girls. Moni, this is how out of touch with society I am. On your playlist, this is so bad. Casey Musgraves is the only, and maybe Alina Baraz. That's the only two people I recognize on your playlist. I mean, that's sad. Okay, more than enough. A fling to love romance. Love those kinds. Kind of where my relationship came from, was a fling to love. All right, chapter 1, Lexie. Why did it bother me so damn much if he had moved on? Trying to be discreet, I scrolled through the pictures and engagement announcement. Erica had texted me for the umpteenth time. My ex-husband and his new bride-to-be stared back at me, their smiling faces souring my mood further. The ink was barely dry on our divorce papers. Oh, honey, let me tell you. I divorced in October. He was engaged by New Year's Eve. And they weren't dating before, so yeah, I know all about it. Okay. Letting my cell phone screen fade to black, I turned my attention to the prospective home buyers currently perusing the craftsman style house I was showing them. As you can see, the skylight I pointed above our heads supplies a lot of natural light into the kitchen and breakfast area. There were notes of distraction in my phone that I hoped weren't noticeable while I used my light skills to show off the well lit kitchen. I always tried to be present when dealing with my clients, despite. And here comes the yawns, y'all. Sorry. Oh, you want me to start with chapter 4? All right, let me do chapter 1 and then we'll kind of play skip because this kind of sets the story. I can't remember. Are your chapters long? Yeah, you're. We'll just go with it. We might say if I make it to 4, fine. If I don't, fine. We're just gonna do this because it'll hook them. I'll be right there at it when I get done anyway. I always tried to be present when dealing with my clients, despite what was going on in my personal life. But seeing my ex happy over his upcoming nuptials was unexpected and unfair. It didn't help that my clients were a perky, newly married couple. Their constant hand holding and stolen kisses when they thought I didn't see them were nauseating. I was surrounded by new, happy relationships, and it made me feel wretched and a little envious. It was getting harder to keep the smile plastered on my face. Don't misunderstand. I wasn't still in love with my ex. We'd fallen out of love ages ago. Not sure we were ever in love in the first place. Our marriage lasted longer than it should have. What I was salty over was it had only been 4 months since the divorce, and the bastard hadn't even waited a decent amount of time to make his side piece his new wife. Not that I knew what a decent amount of time was for something like that. I wanted to go home and wallow, devour a carton of ice cream and watch bad TV. Or, now that summer was here, I'd love to be lazing outdoors near the pool with a good book. But I couldn't because my clients were being super nitpicky over minor details that were easily and inexpensively fixed. This was the 5th house I'd shown them today, the 20th house in the last week. Are these cabinets real oak? The question pulled me out of my head. Gripping my phone tightly in my hand, I turned to address the question. Her fingers skimmed the wood. With fake cheeriness, I answered her. Yes, all the cabinetry throughout the house is oak. The builder spared no expense. My cheeks hurt from the forced effort to maintain the smile. 30 minutes later, we left the house with still no decision made. I waved at them as they pulled away. Once they were no longer visible, the fake grin became a scowl. Sorry, y'all. You know how it goes sometimes with these. And I'm trying different lighting, y'all. I know this probably looks bad, but. And I froze. Ooh, boy, that's ugly. I'm trying to figure out. I'm going to have to get a new camera. I don't like this camera at all. At least when I go back to work in the office every other week, I'll have makeup on my face on those weeks. Outdoors, the heat felt oppressive. My natural hair was a long black mass of curls and coils that were now stuck to the back of my sweaty neck. I hoped I had a hair tie in my purse. On the way to my car, I took my phone out of my pocket and dialed Erica's number. My best friend answered on the first ring. Lexie, are you okay? I appreciated the concern that permeated her words. Instead of getting in my car, I sagged against the door. He's about to walk down the aisle again, and I haven't even been on a single date. My thoughts tumbled over themselves. A full-page spread in the announcement section. He had to make sure it was as public as possible that he was putting a ring on his side chick. Daniel doesn't deserve to get married again, especially before me. He doesn't even know what the sanctity of marriage is. It shouldn't matter. I knew it shouldn't matter, and I shouldn't care. But I was human. I shook my head, even though Erica couldn't see me. Yeah, I was sulking and slightly pissed off. I sounded like a bitter Betty. One of those divorcees that did nothing but trash talk men and marriage like they were the worst things ever created. That was not who I wanted to be. A sigh fell from my lips. I know it isn't some race. I mean, he'd beat me to it anyways. seeing as he already had her picked out and ready to go before he even left me. So I don't know why I'm surprised. Using the tip of my heel, I dug up a loose clump of grass. For some reason, Erica continued to let me ramble on. God knows I'm not in a rush to end up in another broken relationship. I looked at the ground. It's just her divorce was so public. And now I'll have to endure more gossip and people talking behind my back as their wedding draws near. Erica knew how that whole ordeal had been for me. In Oak Bend, people talked. And now, with Daniel getting married again, I knew all eyes would be on me once again, wondering how I will handle the situation. You know what? You just need to get out, hon. Don't think about all those looky loos. Why don't you, Lydia, and I go to the rocks tonight? It'll be a girls' night. Excitement colored her voice. I was sure her mind was conjuring up guzzling cosmos while checking out all the yummy, hot available men, even though she was happily married. It's what I should have been thinking, but my mind was far from wanting a night out on the town. We'll get some drinks, talk, and laugh. We haven't done that in a while. It'll be fun. She was trying to coax me, knowing I was going to resist. I don't know. I'll think about it. I gotta go. Thank you for everything. I hope you change your mind, hun. Talk later. I hung up my phone, not sure if a night out drinking at the bar was the best idea after my ex's engagement announcement. Would people get the message that I was somehow drowning my sorrow in a beer? I didn't want anyone thinking I cared that he moved on. Huffing, I clicked on my key fob and unlocked my car. Instead of heading back to my office at Picket Fence Real Estate, I decided to head to my parents' house. Tomorrow, I would just tell Mitchell, my boss, I was checking out some leads on a new client. I turned on the radio. Loud pop music helped drown out the insistent racket in my head. The drive to my parents was only about 10 minutes. When I pulled up, I didn't get out of the car right away. For several minutes, I sat staring at the stately older home I'd grown up in. Sweat rolling down the back of my neck, reminded me I was still sitting in my hot car. I fumbled through my bag and eventually found a hair tie in one of the inside pockets. I checked my sloppily done ponytail in the mirror. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself and got out of the car. Letting myself inside, I looked around the large entrance hall that opened into the living room. Mom? Dad? When I didn't hear a response, I walked towards the back of the house. The French doors that led to the backyard were thrown open. Out on the terrace, I found my parents working away in the flower garden. My mom looked up from her prized perennials. Oh, Lexa. She gave me a distracted wave and returned her attention to the soil she was digging with my trowel. Why didn't you call first? Hello to you too, Mom. Didn't know I had to announce myself before dropping by. Don't you mind your mother. You know how she gets when she's working in the garden. My dad pushed himself to a standing position, wiped the dirt from his knees, and removed his gloves before coming over. Hey, Dad. Unlike my response to my mother, this time I grinned up at my father before he wrapped me in a bear hug. He was a large man, standing at 6'3". His mustache tickled my cheek when he embraced me. It's good to see you. He released me and stepped back. His brown, bald head gleamed in the sun, shiny with perspiration. What brings you by, Sweet Pea? He asked over his shoulder while he headed towards a table with a large picture of homemade lemonade and glasses were arranged. It was on the tip of my tongue to offer some pitiful excuse for my visit when my mother answered for me like I was a dummy sitting on her knee with her hand shoved up my backside. I'll tell you why she's here. She saw Daniel's engagement announcement in the paper and came here to lick her wounds. My head whipped around so I could stare at my mother, who was now looking at me pointedly. Her mahogany skin dewy from the heat, her perfectly coiffed afro with not a hair out of place, despite the yard work she was engaged in. Either it was my imagination or she delighted in my pain and humiliation. I'm sure because it allowed her to come to my rescue. Here she goes. You know that could be your engagement in the paper and not his if you would only go out with some of the eligible men from your father's office. They are good men. I stopped listening, doing my best not to bristle at her judgmental tone. This was why I sometimes loathed visiting. Ever since I was a kid, my mother was a meddler. She loved fixing me and my problems. I didn't get the lead in the ballet recital when I was 8, and she had to talk with the teacher. At 16, I had a falling out with Lydia, one of my best girlfriends, and my mother meddled in that. The list was endless. Of course, it would be no different now that I was divorced and single. Lay off the girl, Etta. She doesn't need to rush into anything. My dad handed me a glass of the lemonade and winked at me. This time I smiled back, but I knew it didn't quite reach my eyes. Most moms would have been offering comforting words and commiserating with you. Not my mother. She thought it was best to truss me up like a sacrificial lamb and put me back out on the marriage market, even though I'd only been divorced for 4 months and might need time. It's okay, Dad. I took a sip of the lemonade and averted my gaze. Usually his lemonade had a tart sweetness, but today it just tasted bitter. Or maybe it just tasted like that because it's how I felt. My mother was still talking. It took me a second to realize she was addressing me. Are you listening to me? She was giving me that look that said I better be paying attention or there would be consequences. Yes, ma'am. I felt like the 15-year-old girl that had always been afraid to defy her mother, no matter how much I chafed at her words. I had not been the rebellious teen. Those fantasies had only lived in my head. Lord help us, Nathan's in the house. Nina's off walking the dog. I know what she's doing. She's listening, but she's walking the dog. Let's see. It's the only way she can get a chance to listen without everybody else hounding her. Your father and I are having a dinner party here in a week. You will be there. Now would be a great time for me to defy her and say no. After all, I was a grown woman with a successful career, but the defiance withered and died on my tongue before I could open my mouth with a retort. When I did respond, the only word that came out was yes. The woman was relentless. I knew it was a ploy to set me up with yet another young lawyer from my father's law firm, but I didn't argue. I have to go. Once I placed the still full glass of lemonade on the table, I kissed my father and nodded in my mother's direction. See you, sweet pea. My dad rubbed my shoulder. With slow steps, I walked back through the house, feeling like a weight was being lifted from my shoulders with each step. It was often like this after a visit with my overbearing mother. In my car, I sat beside the wheel, stewing over not standing up to her. Why didn't you tell her to shove it? I muttered to myself. Oh, yeah. And how many black girls talked like that to their mothers and survived to see another day? After the day I'd needed something to help me forget my for a while. Girl, I might not be a black girl, But I know if I'd even come close to talking to my mama like that, I'd been toothless. Uh, Before I could overthink it or talk myself out of it, I reached for my phone and dialed Erica's number. When she answered, I didn't even let her say hello. I'm in. Chapter 2, Ezra. Ooh, Ezra. I like that. So we're going to get to know these people before we have the naughty stuff, you know?
You're always going to be a piece of shit, Benedict.
10 years later, and those words still echoed in my head. Many people had said similar words to me over the years, the sentiment varying, but the meaning always the same. A constant reminder that the world thought I was garbage, trash, and would never amount to anything or be someone worth taking a chance on. The back of my neck grew hot from the rage coursing through me, and before I knew it, I was overworking the soul. I let the earth fall from my fingers and sat back on my heels. Mother Nature never did anything wrong to me. No reason to take my anger and frustration out on her. I leaned my head back and shut my eyes. A deep sigh fell from my lips. After taking a few seconds to get my mind right, I went back to work.
You okay?
I didn't look over at Ox, but I could hear the worry in his voice.
Yeah, I'm good.
I hadn't told him yet. We'd lost out on another contract. Needing to forget all the bullshit, I dug a hole in the soil and then pulled the hydrangea from the pot. I roughed up the roots, breaking up the dirt, and compacted roots, relishing the fact that I could channel my fury into the task. Once I finished, I placed the plant in the hole and used the garden hose to fill it with water before I refilled the hole with soil. Inside, I wanted to destroy something, but using my hands to plant something and make something grow made my hot headed anger dissipate a little. A couple of hours later, while we packed our gear away in the truck, Ox spoke.
We didn't get it, did we?
His voice was quiet and resigned, like he'd long ago accepted the rejection and doors being shoved in his face was inevitable. I shook my head and continued loading the unused fertilizer and other tools. Seconds later, it was like someone had flipped a switch on my friend.
We'll get the next one.
The big idiot grinned at me like a fool, then winked before going back for the rest of the supplies. We'd known each other since elementary school, and to this day, when Ox said things like that, I wasn't sure if he was joking, said things said things like that to make me feel better, or he really meant it. Man, if he believed that, the guy was the most pig-headed optimist I'd ever seen. Ox resembled an overgrown bear. He stood at 6'5" and had shaggy brown hair that was usually covered by a ball cap. His pale skin was beginning to redden from too much exposure to the sun. Like me, he'd been told he'd never be shit too. But somehow he let it all slide off his back like it was nothing. I admired his disposition, sometimes wish I had it. I rolled my shoulders to relieve some of the tension that had built up since saw the damn letter this morning. Working in the sun all day had me good and tired. Once we finished loading everything into the bed of my truck, we hopped in.
Why don't we go grab a beer tonight to celebrate?
The look on Ox's face when he said it was like a kid that just learned he was going to get to shoot fireworks on the 4th of July. I wasn't sure why he was so giddy. Holding the key in the ignition switch, I turned to him, my brows bunched up in a scowl.
What exactly are we celebrating? I don't know. The process, the journey.
His excitement still hadn't diminished.
You know you usually celebrate something when you win or you're successful, right?
I spoke to him slowly like I was explaining to a child.
Shit, Ezra, I know that.
For a second, irritation flitted across his face before it once again replaced with some kind of inner peace or joy. I didn't have a name for it.
I just thought how many people are out here trying to get their own business off the ground. trying to make their dreams reality and not just thinking about it. It might not be happening right now. Doesn't mean it ain't gonna happen. I snorted. Pig-headed optimism. The man had it in spades. I turned the key in the ignition. Sure, buddy. We'll celebrate our defeat with a beer. Sarcasm dripped from every syllable. Yeah, I was an asshole for raining on the man's parade, but I couldn't help still feeling like the world was just going to keep dumping on us. Why celebrate that? Once I dropped Ox off, I headed home. When I arrived, I found my 14-year-old half-sister Cameron sitting on the porch swing waiting for me. The kid made me think of Tinkerbell with her newly shorn blonde hair styled into a pixie cut. She had her nose stuck in a book, and her Converse-covered feet were propped on her skateboard, gently rolling it from side to side. It's about time. She turned down the page she'd been reading to mark her place. Usually, I didn't mind her visits, but today I wasn't in the mood. What do you want? Annoyance twisted itself into my words. I opened my garage and started loading everything from my truck inside. Just drop by. With her book and skateboard in her hand, she sat on the bumper of my truck. I'm busy. What bug crawled up your ass? Cameron wrinkled her nose at me. I didn't respond to that, just deflected. Don't you have school? It's summertime. Her eyes bored into me like laser beams. I knew she was trying to figure out why I was acting like such an ass. Sighing, I set down the bag of fertilizer I'd been carrying on my shoulder. Sorry. I squinted at her through the sweat dripping in my eyes. It just hasn't been the best day. Cameron nodded and stood. Instead of leaving like I thought she would, she walked slowly towards me, dropped her belongings to the ground, and put her arms around me in a hug, despite me being a gross, sweaty mess. Here I am, being a jerk to her, and now she was trying to make me feel better. When she pulled away, she looked up at me. Dad could. My mood went from contrite to hostile in 2 seconds. At the mention of the DNA we shared, my nostrils flared and my hands clenched into angry fists. He's your dad, not mine. My words were harsh and resolute. She'd grown up in a world where he dried her tears and fixed her problems. That man never did anything for me but give me his last name. Cameron swallowed down whatever she was about to say and dropped her hands to her sides. My eyes softened. I picked up the bag of fertilizer. I told you I wasn't fit company today. I offered up the words as an apology for snapping at her. Once again, I expected to see her hightail it out of there on her skateboard and go home to a friend's house or wherever she was hanging out over the summer. But she grabbed a couple of the potted plants from the bed of the truck and carried them into the garage. We didn't say anything else to each other while we unloaded the rest of my tools and supplies. Afterwards, she picked up her book and skateboard and followed me inside the house where I gave her a bottle of water. She started nosing about like she always does when I let her inside. I was sure my house was nowhere on the scale of lavishness she'd grown up in. It was older and probably needed some work. My mother left it to me when she passed. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched her while I sipped on my water. Ezra, do you have a girlfriend? Cameron was eyeing the picture sitting on the mantel when she asked me the question. My eyebrows lifted in curiosity. No. Why? I guzzled down more water after answering. Just wondering. She continued her perusal, not even attempting to hide her snooping. Cameron found out about me last year and came poking around. I tried to send her packing, but the kid just wouldn't stay away. I'm sure our sperm donor just loved that. Well, the douchebag still had one other kid that felt the same way about me as he did. I drank down the rest of my water and tossed the bottle into the trash.
This has been fun, but now you have to go. I have some things to do. When I stepped out of the kitchen, I stuffed my hands into my pockets and looked at her. Cameron fixed her face to pout, but seemed to rethink it, letting her face settle into a scowl. Those tricks probably worked on her father and brother. I wasn't that easy. Okay. The grudging tone in her voice and all right. Okay. The grudging tone in her voice and slumped shoulders, along with the fact that she hadn't argued with me, melted me a little bit, though not enough to let her stay today. You can drop by tomorrow. The kid spun around and hugged me like she'd done earlier. I wasn't sure why she seemed so grateful. We'd only known each other a short while, and I wasn't the easiest to get along with. Before I could put my arm around her, she let go of me and headed out the door. Once she was out the driveway, she dropped her skateboard to the ground and jumped on, taking off down the street like something was chasing her. I watched her until she was out of sight, then I shut the door and wandered back to the kitchen. The letter I'd opened this morning still sat on top of the counter. Without giving it another read through, I balled it up and threw it into the garbage can. While I stood there staring at the crumpled paper, my thoughts drifted to the mental checklist of things running through my head. I needed a shower. I stunk. Wasn't sure how Cameron hadn't made a joke about it. A shower would help clear my head. Plus, some bills needed to be paid. As much as I didn't want to go out to celebrate our defeat, beer and some good company might help improve my mood. One last glance at the letter, and I knew I was going to do my best to let the rejection wash down the drain, along with the water when I showered. Oh, werewolf. Nathan, I just have no words for you. All right, chapter 3. Yeah, chapter 3. Chapter 3, Lexie. Fighting the urge to head back to my car, I swallowed down the nerves that were keeping me from heading inside the rocks. My feet felt like they were encased in cement. Plus, I was now beginning to regret my choice in wardrobe. I planned to wear the standard little black dress I usually wore when going out, but it felt too safe. So I chose the sexy red number I'd bought on a shopping trip with Lydia ages ago. It still had the tag on it when I'd taken it from my closet, because I'd been too chicken to wear it until now. Pulling on the short hem, I willed myself to be brave and daring. I gripped my purse strap a bit tighter. One foot in front of the other, you coward. Each time the door opened, the sound of music and conversation drifted out to me. Eric and Lydia were inside waiting on me. I couldn't stand them up. Yeah, I was going to get some stares and probably be the center of some gossip, but I couldn't keep letting that bother me, or I was going to end up a recluse. After taking a deep breath, I held my head high and marched across the parking lot. Once I was inside, the swell of the music engulfed me. I scanned the crowd from the crowded room looking for my friends. It took a second for me to find them seated at the bar. In my periphery, I caught a few people eyeing me and then nudging each other before the whispers began. Standing a bit taller, I gave myself a pep talk. Ignore them. You're here to have a good time with your friends. I made my way to the bar, dodging pool sticks, clusters of people, and waiters carrying trays of drinks. Hey, Lydia's face crumpled into a grimace. Damn, damn. Her short black bob swayed with when she shook her head.
You showed up. I'm happy to see you too, I mumbled and raised my eyebrows in confusion at her less than savory greeting. She's only upset because she lost the bet. She was sure you were going to call with some excuse as to why you couldn't come tonight. Erica grinned at me, turning to Lydia. Her long, curly brown hair glowing under the lights. Pay up. I told you she was going to show. Erica gloated while holding her hand out for her winnings. Lydia wasn't too pleased with having to pay up, but she took the money out of her purse and handed it over. And I may have Lydia and Erica backwards. I don't know who she talked to in the beginning. Was it Lydia or Erica? I don't remember. Sit here. Erica slid over to the vacant stool next to her so I would be seated in the middle. Sorry I was running late. What are you guys drinking? I looked at their cocktails. Erica picked hers up and took a sip. Cosmo? The huge grin that spread across her face told me how much she'd been looking forward to it all week. Her cell phone rang. Give me a second. She turned away to answer. Lydia offered her glass to me. Just gin and tonic. Want a sip? I wrinkled my nose. Not really a gin kind of girl. Suit yourself. She drank down some of the alcohol and set the glass on the bar. By the way, you look fabulous. I wondered if that dress would ever see the light of day. I snorted. She gave me a mischievous grin before turning her attention to the crowd. I knew Lydia was scouring the room for hot available men since she was single like me. I guess I did get the voices backwards, didn't I? Any cute ones? I giggled and set my chin on her shoulder. I'm sorry about earlier. She pressed her cheek to mine. You know I love you. I just hate losing to Erica. I heard that. The three of us chuckled. I wasn't trying to be quiet about it, Lydia said while still nursing a case of the giggles. I began scouring the crowd with Lydia when I saw someone. I wish I hadn't. The minute I laid eyes on Reagan Wesley, my giggles died away. That woman had been the bane of my existence since elementary school. Unfortunately, I still had to see her every day since we both worked at the same realty company. I was about to look away, but then she caught my eye. Reagan narrowed her eyes at me before her mouth lifted in a villainous smile. Seemed she never received the memo that high school ended 10 years ago. She still felt the need to try and torment me whenever we were around each other. Stalking across the room towards us, she dragged her date along beside her. Incoming, Lydia teased before sipping on her gin and tonic. Ladies, her date greeted us, trying to be friendly. Is this where the sad sack divorcees and single ladies sit? Erica rolled her eyes. You don't have a ring on your finger, Reagan, so what's the point of your comment? Reagan parted her lips to throw out another mean-spirited comment, I'm sure, but Lydia beat her to it this time. At least your date has some manners. Why don't you take him and run along before he realizes what a bitch you are and takes off? Or I can kick your bony ass. Reagan's mouth hung open like she was waiting to catch something. She slung her long blonde hair over her shoulder, ready with her comeback when her date sensed things going from bad to worse. We should go. He looked at his watch. Don't want to be late for those dinner reservations. He steered Reagan towards the entrance. Wait! The guy wasn't a fool. He kept his arm around her waist and hustled them to the exit. On her trek to the door, Reagan kept looking over her shoulder, glaring at us. We watched them leave and then erupted into laughter. Kick her bony ass? Erica cackled. Did you see her face? You do know the monster I'll have to deal with when I see her. You do know the monster I'll have to deal with when I see her at work tomorrow, right? Lydia didn't stop chuckling. Oh, I'm so sorry, Lex. She put an arm around me. No, you're not. I shook my head, laughing. Knowing Lydia never resisted the opportunity to antagonize Reagan whenever possible, I love these two women. Erica and Lydia have been my besties since we were practically in diapers. We were the Three Musketeers. My dad used to call us the Rainbow Coalition since I was black, Erica was white, and Lydia was Puerto Rican. Erica had always been the mama. Lydia was the smartass that didn't take any shit, Miss Puerto Rican. I usually ended up being labeled the good girl. Tonight, I realized I didn't want to be the good girl. I didn't want to be Lexie Campbell. Good girl, good daughter, the woman that does everything everyone expects of her. For once, I wanted to be daring and make choices without thinking of all the consequences or what people were going to say. Damn it. I wanted to be spontaneous, at least for tonight. I turned to the bartender. I'd like a shot of tequila and a margarita. In my periphery, I could see Erica and Lydia glance at each other, wearing looks of astonishment over the top of my head. I never did shots. I was waiting on one of them to stop me, but neither of them did. When the bartender set both drinks on the bar in front of me, my eyes stayed locked on the shot. There was still time to chicken out and be good girl, Lexie, but I was here. I'd come out tonight. No standard little black dress, playing it safe. Not caring that Oak Bend was waiting to make me the target of their gossip again. Erica and Lydia were watching me again as I eyed the drink. Both were probably waiting for me to say I'd made a mistake. My friends cared about me, and I knew they would tell me it was okay if I didn't want to do it. But part of me didn't want to keep being that person. The person always scared to take a risk, have a little fun, flirt with danger. Without another thought, I picked up the shot glass, shut my eyes, and gulped down the shot of tequila. The liquor burned my throat and coated my insides in a fiery warmth. It was the clapping that made me open my eyes. Lydia sported a huge grin while applauding me. Didn't think you had it in you. I turned to the bartender with a smile. Another shot of tequila. A couple hours later, I was past my limit. I wasn't seeing double or anything, but I was good and tipsy and ready to do something stupid that I might regret in the morning. I didn't want to be alone tonight. In my intoxicated state, I flung my arms around Erica's neck and butted my forehead against hers. How about another bet? Lydia snickered behind me. What's that? The next man that comes through that door, I pointed in the direction of the door, I'm going to kiss. Before Erica could protest, Lydia jumped in. I'll take that bet, even with a couple of drinks in you. I don't think you'll kiss a stranger. Don't ever make that bet with me, because I'll kiss a stranger in a heartbeat. Erica gripped my face, so I looked her straight in the eye. Hun, are you sure? This isn't just the alcohol talking, is it? For a minute, her change in tone sobered me. The concern I'd heard. The concern I'd heard in her voice earlier today was there again, front and center, warning me away from my own foolishness. But I wasn't going to heed it. I was ready to do something reckless for once in my life. Be someone no one expected me to be. A chuckle fell from my lips, changing the serious mood that had taken over back to one of fun. I'm good. I'm just looking to have some fun. And isn't the saying the best way to get over someone is to get under someone new? I'm going to kiss the next guy that comes through that door and see where the night takes us. Without waiting for her reaction, I pulled away from her and headed to the door. When fear tried to stop me, I looked over my shoulder and gave my friends a little wave while grinning like a fool before I turned back around and continued to my trek. Almost there, I realized Lydia and I had never finished making our bet. At the door, I waited, hoping the next guy that walked through would be a complete troll. Chapter 4. All right, we got to do 4 now. I mean, I know it's about time, but hell, I can't leave you hanging on 4, right? I got started late. Chapter 4, Ezra. When I pulled up to the vendor's bar and grill, I didn't see Ox's van in the parking lot. I got out of my truck to head inside. On the sidewalk, I paused and squinted through the window because someone had caught my eye, and not in a good way. The lighting was dim inside, but at one of the tables I saw Cameron's brother. Yes, Cameron was my half-sister, which made Gabriel, her older brother, my half-brother. But neither he nor I chose to acknowledge the fact. With Gabriel in there holding court with his equally douchebag friends, there was no way I was going in there to grab a beer. The night would more than likely end with me sitting in a jail cell. I called Ox. Change of plans. Benders isn't going to work. I floundered on an alternative. Ox was really hoping to celebrate. It took a second, but I remembered the rocks. A little upscale for my taste, but it would have to do for tonight. Meet me at the rocks. I was already heading towards my truck. And don't laugh, I already know what you're thinking. You're the one who wants to celebrate, so beggars can't be choosers. I ended the call. It was a short drive to reach the nightclub. The parking lot was packed, but I managed to find a space. As I walked towards the entrance, I hoped the place didn't have a dress code. I cleaned up from earlier, but I was still rocking just jeans and a t-shirt. When I stepped through the door, I was about to look around for a spot to hole up and wait for Ox when some woman grabbed my face and crushed her lips against mine. I was about to pull away, but shit, if those weren't the softest, sweetest lips I'd ever tasted. I shut my eyes and went with it. Whoever she was hard and soft in all the right places. And the woman could kiss. She may have started things, but it wasn't too long before I mastered her. My tongue swept in to explore the sweetness of her mouth. She tasted of lime and salt. Cat calls and whistles broke us apart. She pulled away before I did. When I laid eyes on who my kisser was, I was stunned. Lexie fucking Campbell. What had gotten into her? Miss Goody Two-Shoes herself. In high school, we hadn't run in the same circles. She'd been unattainable, respected and well-to-do parents, head cheerleader, student body president, girlfriend to Daniel the Dickwad, captain of the football team. Every guy wanted to fuck her, including me. For a moment, she seemed to sober when she looked at me. Realization shone in her eyes. Just as quickly, she doused the flicker of sobriety and licked her lips in a sexy, suggestive manner. I was sure she knew who I was, but she didn't acknowledge it. Lexie looked over her shoulder at the bar, still a bit unsure, despite the kiss she'd laid on me. Over her shoulder, I glanced in that direction. 2 women stared at us, and I remember the girls they used to be. Lexie's girlfriends. In high school, you rarely saw one without the others. The one with the short hair glared at me. Your friends? Needing something to say, I asked the question, even though I already knew the answer. Lexie whipped back around to face me. I was clear that alcohol was her liquid courage. Nice girls like her didn't pull stunts like that. Suspicion clawed its way into my brain. I narrowed my eyes at her, wondering if this was part of some prank, joke, or dare. Well, if it was, I was calling her bluff. I wasn't going to let her back down. Stepping closer, I put my arm around her waist and pulled her into my body. Her swift intake of breath was followed by her tilting her head back to look up at me. My gaze roamed over her face, taking in those beautiful, luscious brown eyes, her warm brown skin, and the beauty mark that sat at the curve of her top lip. The mess of curls that framed her face made me ache to feel the texture, but I knew better than to put my hands in her hair. For a second, I lingered over her plump lips, remembering how they felt pressed to mine. I wanted more of her. My gaze snapped back up to meet hers, daring her to chicken out. This was a dangerous game she started, and I intended to finish it. Her body trembled slightly. I half expected her to flee back to her friends. Lexie swallowed and licked her bottom lip. Let's grab a drink. When she took my hand and led me to the bar, I followed. The word no longer had a place in my vocabulary. Behind her, I got the chance to enjoy the view. The woman had the most amazing ass, and the short, fitted red dress hugged every curve. Her legs went on for days. Soon, my head was filled with fantasies of taking that red dress off her delectable body. I schooled myself to patience. I was getting way ahead of myself. Just because we shared a kiss didn't mean the night would end with us fucking. I mean, a man can have hope, but I would not presume. Plus, her girlfriends looked ready to whisk her away from my grasp at the slightest unpleasantness Lexie might feel in my company. We didn't join her friends, but they were only several feet away at the other end of the bar. I motioned for the bartender, but Roxy Tyler, the owner, came over to wait on us. Whatever the ladies having, and I'll have a beer. Lexie leaned onto the bar. Another margarita plus 2 shots of tequila. That would explain the lime and salt. Once Rocky pushed our drinks towards us, Lexie pushed one of the shot glasses in front of me. We eyed each other before toasting. To new acquaintances. Lexie gifted me with a sexy little knowing smirk before knocking her glass against mine. I nodded and grinned back at her, then down the shot. Only an hour had gone by in our heavy flirtation with one another before I suggested we leave. Want to get out of here? It was the first time since we headed to the bar that her hesitation returned. It flitted across her face and then disappeared, replaced by that sexy little grin of hers that dimpled her mouth. Let me grab my stuff. Watching her head to her friends, I wondered if they'd talk her out of leaving with me. The three of them exchanged a few words, but a couple of minutes later, she headed back towards me. I took her hand and pushed her through the crowd. Out on the sidewalk, I pulled her into my side and dipped my head to kiss her. The way she clung to me had me wonder what her naked skin would feel like beneath me. By the time we reached my truck, we couldn't stop making out. I pressed her against the passenger side and kissed the life out of her. It took a few minutes, but we finally pulled apart. I fumbled for my keys and unlocked the door. I helped her inside, then went to the driver's side before I started the car. I looked at her. My place or yours? Yours. I took the quickest route I knew to my place. Damn near ran a red light in my haste to get us to my house. She kept running her perfectly manicured hand up and down my thigh, making me harder. Anticipation was killing me. Once I pulled into my driveway, I turned off the truck and looked at her. I put a lid on the lust that was riding me. We'd both been drinking, and I wanted to make sure she wanted the night to happen exactly as I did. We both know what's going to happen once we're on the other side of that door. If it's not your intention, tell me now, woman, and I'll take you home. Once I get you inside, I'm not going to be able to keep my hands off you. Lexie looked towards my house and back at me. Any hesitation she'd been feeling at the beginning of the night was nowhere in sight. She reached for me and kissed me. This time, she didn't linger. I want tonight to happen just as badly as you do. That was all I needed to hear. I jumped out of my truck and slammed the door. I rushed around to her side and helped her down. For a minute, we stood in the driveway, kissing each other. We needed to get inside. Her lips tasted heavenly, but I tore myself away from the sweet kiss and took her hand. With quick steps, we were at my front door. I had my keys ready, and seconds later, we were inside my house. I'd barely gotten the door closed, and Lexie was reaching for the button on my jeans. I cupped her face between my hands and kissed her, still unable to resist the allure of her mouth. While we stood lip-locked in the middle of my living room, she kicked off her heels, reducing her height by a few inches. Light filtered in through the window, casting the room in a glow. When I broke our kiss, Lexie stood before me, panting, shadows playing across her face. She stared up at me, looking equal parts vulnerable and sexy. Without breaking eye contact, I reached behind her and unzipped her dress. My fingers swept up her arms to pull the straps from her shoulders and push the fabric down her body until it pulled on the floor at our feet. In her lacy black bra and panties, Lexie was a sight. All soft curves, her perky brown globes ready to burst forth from the cuffs of her bra and fill my hands. I picked her up in my arms and she wrapped her long legs around my waist, cupping her ass in my hands. I walked down the hall to my bedroom. The scent of jasmine wafted up my nostrils. I wanted to bury my nose in the hollow of her throat and inhale before I licked her to see if she tasted of jasmine too. Lexie began to nibble on my earlobe and then swiped her tongue along my neck. I shivered and quickened my steps. The fleeting thought that I had the girl that had been the most popular in high school in my arms and was about to feel one of my teenage fantasies made me grin like a fool. With my booted feet, I kicked the door to my bedroom closed behind us. At the foot of the bed, I set her on her feet. We made quick work of my clothes. Once I was completely naked, her hands explored my body while I removed the last two garments, keeping me from seeing every bare inch of her. The minute she was naked, I wasted no time letting my hands play and roam freely over her body. My callous, work-worn hands ran along her skin. It felt like velvet beneath my fingers. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't force my tongue to form words. Man, she was gorgeous. Partly, I was afraid if I spoke, she'd realize she was making a mistake and bolt. Lexie moaned while I touched her and played with her. The woman was so feminine down to her pretty painted toes. The sighs that fell from her mouth made my dick hard. She was so fine. Not fragile like China. I could feel the strength in her body and limbs. She just felt delicate in my hands. I wanted to treasure her and protect her, but the base part of me also wanted to use her body so thoroughly, fuck her so hard until she quivered and shook beneath me and told me she had enough and couldn't take any more. When we were both in a fever of need by the time we ended up in my bed. Once I'd settled on my knees between her parted thighs, I reached over to my nightstand to grab a condom. Her mouth was on me, licking and sucking any part of me she could reach. She playfully bit my nipple and then swiped her tongue across it to soothe the sting left behind. The sensation traveled so quickly to my dick, for a minute I almost ran into her bare back. If she kept up like that, I wouldn't be able to get the condom on. I stuck the edge of the condom wrapper between my teeth and gently used both hands to push her shoulders back to the mattress, removing her mouth from my body. Her gaze flicked up to meet mine. Then it slipped to my dick, which was now hard, throbbing and standing at attention. I took the condom from my mouth and handed it to her. My body craved more of her touch, especially my dick. With deft fingers, she had the condom out of the wrapper in seconds, rolling it onto my hard length. I bit my lip. Once she finished, she stroked her hand along my dick. Oh, no, you don't. I grabbed her wrist and pinned it to the bed. With my other hand, I checked to make sure she was ready. When I pressed a finger inside of her, she cried out with need. Lexie was so wet, and I was ready to give us what we both wanted. Rubbing the head against her folds, I felt scalded by her desire. I couldn't wait anymore. I plunged inside her slick walls and didn't stop until I was lodged so deeply and completely inside of her. I gasped at how tight she was. For a minute, I lay there on top of her, unable to move. She felt so damn good. Then I realized I might be crushing her and leaned my weight on my forearms. Lexie wrapped her legs around me and kissed my throat. I moved in and out of her, only going slow for a few strokes before I was moving at a quick pace. It wasn't too long before she was moaning and clawing at my back. Ezra, she breathed out in a long sigh of ecstasy that seemed to beg me for more. Hearing my name fall from her lips during our fucking made me ravenous to fill my ears with more of her breathy moans and sighs, but especially more of her calling my name. All night, it was like she pretended not to know who I was, and now she was acknowledging I was the one making her body sing, making her feel so good she had to yell my name. I promised myself if this was the one and only night I was going to have with Lexie Campbell, I was going to make sure she never forgot it. Bada boom, bada bang. I'm done. Nathan, I am your audio. Uh-huh. See there? Darling, right now I don't have the energy to do my own job, much less read books out loud all the time. All right. See, 1 hour, and I started an hour ago, so that's about right. I know, I don't have the stuff to do it. Thank you, Miss Shirley. All right. Thank you, Miss Moni, for letting me read it. I appreciate it so much. It's so cute. So, all right. I'm out of here. It's getting close to my bedtime, and I get up at 7. So, I don't know about this 2 a.m. shit that Nathan's talking about. That's when Mike comes to bed. That's when Big Daddy comes to bed, and I don't even know that half the time. And you're more than welcome, Miss Moni. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for writing such great books. All right, everybody. I'm going to bed shortly. And you guys have a wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend. Get some books read. But also, if it's pretty in your area, get outside and do something. Even if it's just to take a walk around the neighborhood or the yard or something. Just get outside and enjoy it. Soak up some vitamin D. I sat on my deck today at lunch and soaked up some vitamin D. It was nice. All right, you got up to 79 degrees here today, Miss Shirley. Can you believe that? 79. No one's supposed to happen until Sunday. What's it going to be Sunday? 85? It's getting a little warm for me. All righty. Y'all have a good evening. That's what I was doing, Miss Pebbles. I was reading outside. So, All right, everybody, have a great night and a great weekend. Only one more day to this week to go. All right. Love you guys. Happy reading.